Guys, welcome back to the channel. Today's episode, we're finally finishing the Alfa Romeo GTV's engine build. Definitely excited. We still haven't got the intake on or the exhaust. That's coming at a later date, a later episode. But we're focusing on showing you and finishing up the build itself, getting the head on. As you can see, it's done here, but we're going to go back in time. Videos are great. We can do that and show you the process of finishing up building this motor. So I'm excited to get started. Follow us along on the final build process of this pretty cool motor. At the end, we'll go over all the stats, everything we put into this motor. I know we've probably have talked about it in other videos, but we'll just kind of recap the parts and the pieces that are in this motor. It's going to be pretty cool, and then we'll talk about the fuel injection as well. All right, let's get started. All right, so we are going to put on the head gasket. Of course, everything was clean before laying it down. Next step will be the little rubber O-rings, as you can see, that I'm putting around the little oil galleries. So this will be to help seal that area once the head has been I guess, offered up to the block itself and torqued down. That'll be more of a sealing mechanism. So once all that's done, then we'll focus on the timing chain. All right, so we'll go ahead and put the timing chain in, and we'll use this little magnet to get it around the gears. So this is really kind of a long, drawn out process. I didn't figure you'd want to watch every second of it, so we'll kind of just show you what we're doing here. We're getting around the gears and then swinging it back up around the other side. The magnet definitely helps us take care of that. Okay, head is going on the blocks, as you can see. Once we get everything, make sure it's all lined up, then we'll just drop the head down and then use, a rubber mallet or whatever to secure the head the remainder of the way down. And that point, then we'll move on to the timing chain, getting it around the sprockets, the cams, and getting all that tightened up. So hang tight. We'll get the head put on and then start working on the timing chain. All right, head is on, as you can see. Now we're going to get the timing chain wrapped around the sprockets, and then we'll secure it with the chain link, and then show you how we expand out that chain to make sure that it is fully tight, so we don't have any slack or where basically the timing chain is going to bounce back and forth off of the head itself. So let's go ahead and get the timing chain on. All right, Brad is fishing up the timing chain on his side of the motor. As you can see, just kind of slinging it off to the side. The biggest thing you got to do is make sure you keep a hold of these things, or they will definitely go right back down in the engine. And this probably happened about 1,000,000 times. I think this is one of the toughest jobs to me on building an Alfa motor is the timing chain itself. Now you will notice that sprocket is turning freely. Of course, that's not the cam turning. We just got the sprockets loosened so that we're able to roll the chain up on the sprocket, so that when we show you here in a second, put the link on the timing chain itself, we can latch everything down. Then we'll tighten the sprockets down, and then we'll tighten the chain up here. So right now we're just kind of going over getting the chain through the parts of the motor that it needs to go, getting around the gears, and then here just in a second we'll show you how we put the link on it, and then of course tighten up the timing chain itself. All right, that was a lot of work. So here you can see we've got the link on. We've got the little C-clips on the link itself. So everything's tight. So now, of course, it's loose here. So now we're going to be able to tighten up the chain. That bolt sits right in front of the head. I think it may be a 13 mm. And there you go. As you can see, it just released it. It put tension. So the timing chain tensioner worked well, and it's got tension on the chain itself, so we should be good. This is me just trying to see if I can pull any more tension into it before tightening up the bolt itself that sits on the front left of the head. I apologize, that was not in the frame for some reason, but I think we've got it good here. So now what we'll do is we'll go ahead and tighten up the bolts here for, or the nuts for the cam sprockets themselves, and get those latched in. And then at that point, we'll move on to the next part. All right. Now this is the exhaust cam, and we've got our little cam templates. Now these are 11 millimeter cams from Paul Sperl. So we've got to set the timing marks a little different than what it would normally be. I call it OEM. So we're going to set the timing marks for that and just verify it all. So we're going to be advancing the exhaust cam just a little bit, and then we'll jump on to the intake. But you can see these are amazing templates that we can use to adjust the cam timing. I'll leave the link below where I got them off the Alfa forum. All right, on to the intake cams themselves. And again, template, as you can see, says IN, that's for the intake, and then we had the EX for exhaust on the other side. So the templates are designed specifically for intake and for exhaust itself. So same thing, we're just going to work on adjusting the timing, making sure it's right. And then once we have all that set, then we'll completely cinch down the front nuts on the cam sprockets and go on to the next stage of the motor itself. But we're very, very close to being finished. All right, now we are definitely cinching down the nuts, tightening them up on the cam sprocket themselves. So, of course, you can't really get in a torque wrench to figure it out, so we just get it as tight as we can. Once we have it completely tight, we tighten it just a little bit more. So you really want these things pretty tight, but you also notice the sprocket on the right, just exactly where I just put the wrench. You notice that there is a tab in there that locks them in place, and then you have the little bolt and the nut that goes into the proper hole. You just have to kind of find it, the one that matches up perfectly, and put that in and tighten it up with the quarter pin. That way you're not worried about the cam sprockets coming loose and jumping time on you, which could be really, really bad. So let's finish tightening them up, and then we're going to start working on the distributor side, which really isn't a distributor. All right, guys, this is our Hall effect sensor. This Hall effect sensor goes right in where the distributor would have gone, and it matches up to the oil pump itself, just like the distributor would have done. So as you can see here, we're rotating the motor. So as it goes back all the way back around to the sensor itself, this little magnet gets into the center of the sensor, and that tells the EFI system, or fuel injection system, that we are sitting at top dead center. So as you can see, we're just rotating the motor, making sure it lines up right to the markings on the cam itself. So at this point, we don't have any plugs in the motor or anything. We're just freely rotating this motor just to make sure that we're right. So as you can see here, we kind of pan up. It may be a little dark, but our markings from where we had to set new markings are perfectly in place. You've got the lobes pointing outward, which they're supposed to do, so we're good on the timing. All right, now we're going to button up the head. We're going to torque it down. But before that, we're going to use some AR lube on the studs themselves. Just makes it a little bit easier to torque down, really more smooth when you're torquing it down, so you're not catching on any of the threads. We're using AR lube. We could easily use kind of that, all-in-one oil or any kind of motor oil or anything like that. We could use that. We just had AR lube laying around. That's what we decided to use. So here we're just going to put them in, put the lube on there, get them torqued down, and then move on to the bottom half of the engine, getting the oil pan installed. All right, so here you can see that we're installing a windage tray onto the motor itself. So the oil pan will sit on top of this, but right now what we're doing is we're putting a little blue Loctite down, and we're putting the locking tabs on that, and we're going to lock it down. I'm going to let it sit basically for 24 hours overnight, and then we'll pick up the next day, and then we'll be installing the upper or lower, or well, both the upper and the lower um, oil pans, and getting all that cinched down. So right now we're using some gasket maker sealer. We've got that down, as you can see, and then we've got the windage tray on. We're going to go down and install all the locking washers, or locking bolts, excuse me, on it, and then we'll torque those down, and then we'll move on the next day to the oil pan. All right, I know this is kind of controversial, or whatever you want to call it. Some people like to do this, some people don't, but we're just putting a very thin layer of RTV down on the surface where the oil pan gasket will adhere to. I always do this. I really do believe it helps. It's tough to completely seal an Alfa motor completely without some kind of leaking going on. It's just, I mean, part of the deal with these things. I guess you kind of always, that saying says, when a Alfa's engine's got oil in it because it leaks. So we've got the RTV down, so we're finishing that up, and now we're putting on the gasket itself, and I'll get that lined up and pressed down, and then we'll do the same thing on the engine side, where we did that, I guess, with the windage tray, but this will just bolt right on top of the windage tray itself. All right, so here we go. We're turning over the oil pan, and we're putting it now on top of the bottom end of the block, just right over the windage tray itself. And so, as you can see, I'm just kind of straightening it all up. Once that's on, we'll start putting the bolts on. We'll lock it down. I'm going to let it sit overnight, and then we'll come back and we'll start working on the lower oil pan, which I call the alien looking thing or what have you. And then I think we'll be really about finished. All right, real quick, before we put the lower oil pan on, as you can see, I flipped the motor back around. The timing cover itself, we got a few bolts at the bottom that will bolt up to the oil pan, so I'm just going to go ahead and do those before I forget. It's important. There's just, 3 or 4 on this 1.6 liter, one over by where the Spica is at. As you can see me putting it in now, where the Spica would go, ejection system would go, so that one's going in. So yeah, so I'll get those done, then we'll flip this thing back around. Okay, just like the upper oil pan, we're putting the RTV on the lower oil pan now. Again, we're going to go just all the way around it, a very, very thin coat. As you can see, you can almost see through it. Just very, very thin. Of course, we'll go and we'll scrape off the extra that oozes out once everything's dry. That's pretty simple. But again, we're trying to give it the best opportunity not to leak. I doubt that will 100% happen, but we're going to really, really try pretty hard. And I think this RTV gives us the best opportunity, the best percentage to keep oil leaks from happening. So let's get that done, and then we'll offer up the lower oil pan, get that bolted down, and then we are officially finished with building this motor. All right, RTV's on. We've got the gasket on itself, as you can see. We put RTV on the other side of the lower oil pan itself. And so now this is me coming in, and what I'm going to do now is just go ahead and install the lower oil pan. As you can see, it's going to happen about right around here. And once the lower oil pan is on, then we'll start putting bolts in it, and we'll get it bolted up. Just be careful. Try to line it up good. Maybe use some kind of a small screwdriver, stuff, make sure you can get into the holes just fine. And then once all that happens, then you can start putting in the screws. All right, we're getting the bolts in here, as you can see. So we're just going to bolt them down. Again, what you want to do on these, even the upper oil pan, the timing cover, I think I've said it a few times in the video. I mean, it's really hand tight.
you got to be careful, or you will definitely strip or break a bolt or something. Especially, you'll probably more strip it with this aluminum, and you don't want to do that. That would just take quite a bit to fix and repair, or you may have to just find a way to replace the whole oil pan. So just take your time. It's really hand tight, 7-8 foot-pounds of torque at the most. So that's really kind of a feel. Just hand tighten it, and again, just don't over torque these bolts because you're going to tear something up. All right, so I think we're going to wrap this thing up. This has been fun building the motor itself. I can't wait to show you in the next episode the fuel injection system and everything we're doing from that standpoint. So hold tight here. Let's get this video wrapped up. I'll give you my thoughts and we'll go on to the next episode.
All right, guys, and that is a wrap. The engine is rebuilt. Really, we went back in time to show you the footage, but either way, the engine's built. So let's talk a little bit about, let's recap a little bit on what we've got in this motor, and then talk about the next episode itself. So we went with Paul Spurl. Of course, I've done all my engine builds using his product, great guy to work with. So knowledgeable, as everybody knows, in the Alfa community. So we did a 11-to-1 compression ratio on this motor here. This is the 2-liter Spica motor. We've done 11 millimeter cams on it. So both sides, intake, exhaust, both 11 millimeter cams. The engine rebuild kit includes all the fun stuff, all the chain, the new chain, everything. It's included, the whole 9 yards from beginning to end. We did the upgraded gaskets. We did everything that we possibly could purchase to make this motor really a pretty special motor when it's said and done. So everything came from Paul Spurl. Even included his new high flow oil pump. So we got that in. As you can see here, no ignition. We'll talk about that in a second. But yeah, so just a full rebuild. Sent the head off to get just kind of looked over and pressure tested, make sure everything was good there. Head's in great shape. Larger sized valves, I think 46 millimeter on the intake side, so much bigger. Pistons are designed, they're clearanced for it. We're just going to have to look at, I've got the old spark plugs in it right now. We're going to have to look at the spark plugs and make sure that they're barely in, just to make sure that they clear the new valves. We may have to do something there. We're not sure yet, but that's going to come. We'll talk about that in the next episode as well. So, all right, so engine's rebuilt. We're good to go there. We talked about we're going to do a fuel injection system, one that I am designing, that we're going to put in place, and that's going to be pretty cool. So this is kind of a trigger sensor here, and then we've got one, of course, on the flywheel itself. We'll block off the Spica. Where the Spica goes, we've got the block off plate for that. Gen V throttle bodies, or what we're putting on there. We've got the plates for the throttle bodies. We pretty much have everything. We've been kind of off the motor, checking for everything, making sure fitment's right and all that before we start to put it on the motor. So the next episode will be us getting the intake on and getting all the fuel injection system put together, and then we'll get it on the run stand, and then we'll start the process of getting her cranked up and putting the computer to her. We're using Max ECU for the ECU itself, and so we'll be putting that onto the computer and dialing her in there. So we're building this and we're showing this to you because I love to document my restoration processes, but also we will be selling Spica or fuel injection conversions from Spica motors. That's going to be a full kit. You're watching us put it together. You're watching us configure it. It's going to be all done, and then you're going to be able to buy that kit directly from us, or you can send us the car and we'll put we'll do the injection system for you, or we can even build your motor as well if that's something that you want. So that'll be coming in later episodes. We'll get all that on the website. All that stuff will kind of it'll merge together at the right time. But now we're just going to let you keep following along on this build here. Again, the engine is finished. It's completed. Now we're working on the fuel injection system in the next episode. So you will not want to miss that. So we're going to end this video. Please like, subscribe, and ring the bell so you see the new future episodes coming on. And that way you won't miss anything. And as always, God bless.